early on, I think I'd been in the job a month, maybe two, I had a phone call, and it was TV1 doing a story out in Waitara. It was related to the leases. There's leases out from stolen land of Māori, perpetual leases. So every 20 years the lease comes up for renewal, and of course if you've had 20 years of a set lease amount, it can go from a few hundred to a few $1,000s, and it really hits people who particularly are on low income or struggle. So go out there, do the interview. The officer said don't go out there, there's nothing to be gained, because Te Atiawa and the Crown are going through a settlement process which includes those leased properties. 780 odd leased properties on confiscated land. Very tricky, leave it. No, I can't be a mayor from my office, I'm going to go out and talk to the people, and I did. Had a cup of tea in the family's house, people were crying, young family who was struggling as to how they may afford this increase in lease. Took all that down, took my notes, driving back to the office, thinking I'm sick of this stuff, Maoris, how much more, when's it going to end? You know, all the cliches of my own prejudice that I've had all of my life towards all things Māori, whereas I said then Maori. In any case, get back to the office, say, look, I'm thinking to myself, I'm the mayor, I want to make a difference, I want to help these poor leaseholders out of this. They don't know who the new landlord's going to be, it could be the local tribes, there's uncertainty, I'm there for them. Give me some reading material about what's the state of play. And I just happened to open up on the story of Te Atiawa, who was actually, this was the settlement going through with the Crown. And I started reading a few pages and a few more and a few more and a few more, and I was actually capsulated, and before I knew it I'd read the full part from Te Atiawa. And by part what I mean is the historical accounts through their eyes, as in Te Atiawa's eyes. And what jumped out it's so loud to me was not so much, not only what happened, but how it had happened in our past. And that planted a seed that has been a constant journey for me about why I didn't know this. Why didn't I know? And so a lot of work that goes under the bridge. We just happened to be also in the initial phase of putting council together. So one of the roles that a mayor has is establishing committees and working groups as to how a council will roll and operate. We have finance, risk and audit, we have monitoring and policy, and we used to have what was called Taranaki Maori, which was a subcommittee to deal to legislation in a sense, because councils are by law required to include Māori in your decision making. So putting that to the one side, I'm on my journey, I go to introduce myself and meet the kaumātua here in town. I'd never been in an environment with kaumātua in my life, I'd never been on a marae. And I reflect now, I think back, and I was almost shaking with nerves because I looked into the room and it was full of Māori. But the funny thing for me to think to myself was, A, why did I think that? Why was looking into a room, why was that the first thought to me? What was I scared of? What did I think was going to happen? And I didn't know, but you're the mayor, you have to do this, and I hongied the whole room. I'd never hongied in my life. And it was all spoken in te reo for the first hour or so, and I'm sitting there conjuring up thoughts of what I'm going to say, because I can't speak any te reo. I could say kia ora. Long story short, what actually happened was just they were welcoming me as the leader, the rangatea, and giving me encouragement and support, and said, we're here for you, and whatever help you need, we're the kaumātua, we have protocols, but anything you may need, and there's a few events coming forward, we'd love you to be there. And we had a lunch, and it was amazing. Out of that conversation, I dropped in about establishing Taranaki Maori. And some of the leaders, not all of course, but some of them said, look, with all due respect, Māoridom for Taranaki, we're transitioning from grievance to participation. So Taranaki Maori had a place, but it's no longer relevant for us. You know, we know that you're required by law to engage with us in a sense. We would prefer something more authentic and real and closer to the decision making. And I thought, oh, that's a fair question. So I went away and we thought about this and got back and said, well, what would that shape, how would that work? How do you see that rolling? And they said, well, you have your standing committees, and we know that you can appoint the experts that you may not have on those committees to have an active part, like you may appoint an accountant to a risk and audit committee, who you're bringing in the expertise to fulfil your obligation. I thought, well, that makes actually logical sense. Yeah, that's a great idea actually. And anyway, they said regional council here in Taranaki is going through its settlement, and they are going to have by right in perpetuity representation on their standing committees with voting rights. Auckland Council has a model. The East Coast has a model, regional council there. So we're simply like that. We know there's a thing called Māori ward, but we're aware that that will never fly in our province. And I said, well, I'll take this to the council. So I did, but lost it by one vote. The discussion in the main was you cannot have unelected people on a standing committee with a voting right. Unelected, and I think, well, no, you can do it with the risk and audit that I suggested. So that doesn't jive, and if I did that, that would probably be seen as the right proper thing to do to fulfil the requirement of having the expertise there. We don't have Māori around the table that can fulfil all those obligations, but lost was lost. Here's a little bit of an ironic twist in timing of things. I had 2 weeks before we had to begin our representation review. So every 6 years, every council in New Zealand is required by law, the Local Government Act, a separate statute on councils, to review your makeup of your representation for your council. That means whether or not you have community boards, whether or not you have a ward system, or elected at large, and how many councillors you may have. So New Plymouth, for example, we could have had maximum of 30 councillors, minimum of 6. Quite a wide range given our population base. And there's an option called Māori ward. And if you're going to do Māori ward, you have to do that. If you decide to do that, you need to do that first, because that option can go to a binding petition and poll potentially. And you also have to do it first because if it sticks or stays, it changes the mesh block numbers for voting, which starts to get a bit boring in the sense of how that works, but because you're taking off an electoral roll, so it changes the numbers that are left. So I took that to the council, because actually those that said you can't have unelected people on your council, well, here's the option provided that you can have elected people on your council. It's called Māori ward, and it's part of our representation. We wouldn't have it this term, but it would be set up for the next term. And they're voted, because you're voted off the Māori electoral roll, just as you are in central government. And I got it through, got it across the line. Some councillors, some of the dynamics changed. Some councillors didn't turn up to the meeting. Some others that weren't there previously were, and we got it across the line. One councillor resigned on the spot. But you would have thought I'd just thrown some kind of grenade into my community. Because all of a sudden, of course, what I'm getting is such ranging things from, what a wacky idea, why didn't you campaign on that? If I'd known you were all for Māori around the table, I wouldn't have never voted for you, to Māori ward, what do they mean? When I go to hospital, I don't have a Pakeha ward. Why would you have a Māori ward at the hospital? So a lot of confusion. In any case, so what we did was, I thought, look, we need to communicate this, because there's a window of time for people to form a petition and a poll. And I only had 2 weeks to bring that to the council table, because the process of policy had to be done. So we had some community conversations, went around all the community halls. We had a big event in town. I was explaining how this process worked and what it meant. I was having to explain it to politicians who had no idea what it meant. Wrote to Paula Bennett around the process is unfair, because it's the first decision of representation. Only that decision can go to a poll. She thought it was fine. She was the then Minister of Local Government. And sure enough, a petition was formed and a poll was produced, taken, and 80% rejected it. Once you've done that, you then talk about representation in general. So that includes wards. We have wards in New Plymouth. We have rural wards and urban wards. We have 10 seats in New Plymouth and 4 in the rural communities. So the same people who said to me, you can't have Māori there as a separate seat, but I have to have a seat because I'm a farmer and you city folk don't talk for my worldview, didn't connect with what the thinking around representation actually means. Because we actually have a treaty, which is an obligation for us to have representation with our treaty partner. This is a process put there by the Crown, challenged at the time and passed through the High Courts as a legitimate option to fulfil that obligation. However, we finished off our representation review, stayed the same. So people say, why you keep going on about this? And I say, well, this is the big angst with me, is A, we don't talk about a treaty, so we have no basis of an understanding of a treaty. And I say that because the question that was put to us as a community and country really was quite simple. It was a question of inclusion.